This morning, I wanted to tell you about our friends at High Desert Meat Processing, where they process one animal at a time. What you bring in is what you get back. This is going to be important, with the hunting crowd out there and bringing in lots of game. And some of you will want to obviously fill your freezers for the winter. Darren Van Horn, owner of High Desert Meat Processing in Twin Falls, Idaho, he's got more than 30 years' experience in the meat business. We recommend you visit High Desert Meat Processing on Facebook, and you can read reviews. We got a customer review on air one day. Wonderful to hear that. Give High Desert Meat Processing a telephone call for your wild game and domestic processing needs. The number is 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking. Nothing gets shipped out. Specialty meats, jerky. This is the part that's always toughest for me because I love the sound of all of these. And I start thinking about the flavor. Pepperoni, salami, summer sausage, kielbasa, breakfast sausage, brats, Polish dogs, hot dogs, and much more. USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers and their programs to ensure quality meat. 734-9949. Talking a little bit about this situation this morning, and if you've got a comment or question for us, feel free to give me a shout. The number is 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We've been talking about refugee resettlement, and really, we now are seeing a national trend and really an international trend of people saying, you know what, let's dial it back. Let's figure out who's who before we jump in headlong with all of this. 54 at 834. You're next. You're on the air. Morning.
Morning.
Sure. You got to turn the radio down because you're hearing delay.
Okay, it's down.
All right, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm grateful that the governor has made a stand. Somebody has some guts to do something, because I think we don't need to have a ton of refugees in our area.
And I think that his point was he's not necessarily opposed to resettlement, but he is concerned. He's got to be concerned about safety in the state.
Well, right, yeah, we're all concerned because, like you say, there are a majority. I mean, not necessarily a majority, but there's going to be some in there that are sneaking in, and, you're not going to know who it is. And the more percentage that you get of Muslims in the area, it causes trouble. Look at France.
Yeah,
Look at Norway. They kicked all of theirs out.
And many of the countries,
they were raping the women.
Many of the countries in Europe are reestablishing these borders, and this is the breakdown of the whole European Union, but they realized they couldn't handle this any longer.
Yeah, it's not good. And as far as what Ben Carson said about a Muslim president, I totally agree. I wouldn't want one either because, if you've ever read the Quran, they're devoted to what they believe, and they want the rest of the world to do that. But we don't want to do that. We live in America. We have our freedoms and we have our rights. And we're offended by some of the things that they say and they do. But do you see us getting on the bandwagon trying to chop somebody's head off for it? No.
I think that last comment's a very good comment. I thank you very much for the input this morning. 836, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Pat Buchanan is writing a column, and I said the same thing the other day. If I said I wouldn't vote for a Democrat, I wouldn't expect people to say, well, you're being mean and that's being bigoted and prejudiced. No, I just don't agree with them. So I wouldn't vote for one. And this is what Buchanan has to say. Carson did not say no Muslim could serve. This is from Pat Buchanan. He said he would not advocate having a Muslim as president, that Islamic beliefs are inconsistent with the U.S. Constitution. Buchanan asks, is he wrong? Or is it now impermissible to question a candidate's beliefs about God, man, and the state, and about whether his religious convictions might affect his conduct in office? A man's religion is a part of who he is, Buchanan writes, while not an infallible guide to what he will do, is often a reliable roadmap. If Mormons still champion polygamy and declared that blacks could not be Mormons, would it be illegitimate to raise that issue? Or should a Quaker who believes in turning the other cheek not be pressed on whether his faith disqualifies him to be commander-in-chief? If an evangelical running for president believes the end times are at hand, would it be un-American to ask of the Armageddonite if his religious beliefs might affect his decision on war in the Middle East? So I think that Buchanan's raising some questions here that media really should be raising across the board. But, of course, they would rather jump on top of Dr. Carson and stamp him out because they don't want him in the way when they try to anoint Hillary as president. Buchanan goes on to say Islam means submission, and a believing, practicing, devout Muslim believes in submission to the teachings of the Prophet. Anyone recall a collective protest, he writes, from the Islamic world when that Afghan convert to Christianity was facing the executioner's axe? Islam instructs its adherents not only how to live their lives, but also how to organize their society. So yes, we would ask all of these questions of a Christian now, wouldn't we? In fact, we do. And in fact, most people in mainstream media mock Christianity. And they mocked, of course, the last candidate for the Republican Party in 2012 because of his Mormon faith. And yet they won't sit back and give Carson the same opportunity to say, hey, look, we got a few questions here. 8:38, Bill Colley with you. Carson appearing on O'Reilly Factor last night, and of course, O'Reilly giving him a hard time about this.
The fact of the matter is, this is America. We have our own set of values and principles. I'm not willing to subjugate that to another belief system, to another philosophy. This is America. If you want to live in another system, go somewhere else. You're welcome to be here, but no one else gets to change who we are.
Okay.
And I'm finding that is resonating with the American people. We are very welcoming people, but we're not willing to change who we are.
Then are the tenets of Islam, as described in the Quran, do they line up with the tenets of Judeo-Christian philosophy that the founding fathers used to forge the Constitution, our laws, and our nation? Tenets of Islam, Judeo-Christian philosophy, do they line up together?
I don't believe that they do. When I look at Islamic nations, what I see are people who don't give women equal rights. In some places, women aren't even allowed to drive.
But that's political, not religious, though.
Now, here's a question for you lefties out there. Would it be appropriate to ask this question? Is Ben Carson right? What you're asking is, well, what you're saying is he's hurting people's feelings. Forget that for a moment. Is he right? 20 minutes away from 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Looking for a high in the 90s today. Got plenty more coming up. In fact, if we get a chance, I want to talk about the Speaker Boehner stepping down. No big surprise there. I guess it's just the surprise of when it actually happened. Here's a question. Are you on medication for high blood pressure or a diuretic? These medications can affect your hearing. Hearing health is a reflection of your overall health. When you come in for a free wellness hearing screening at Mount Harrison Audiology, Dr. Christine Pickup will review your medications and also discuss ways to protect your hearing in the future. If you've not yet heard of Mount Harrison Audiology, the doctor of audiology, Christine Pickup, she was here in the studio with us a couple of weeks ago. She's located in Rupert at 1218 9th Street, Unit 2. It's not too far from the school out there, from what I understand. Telephone number, if you'd like to reach her office, is 208-312-0957, or you can check out the office at mountharrisonaudiology.com. We have a caller joining us. Our number, if you're looking to get in touch with the program today, and I know sometimes there are some new folks out there joining us, perhaps for the very, very first time, and some folks may have this already on speed dial, but the telephone number for the studio, 736-0300, 736-0300, 844. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 53 on our way into the lower 90s today. You're up next. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning, Bill. I totally agree with Dr. Carson. And what he was trying to get over to people is that our Constitution guarantees us certain rights that can't be taken away. Under Sharia law, you have no rights. That's what he's trying to get across to people.
The thing is that way back in 1960, John F. Kennedy had to go give a speech to some Baptists and tell them, look, I will not be running the presidency as a vassal of the Pope in Rome. And he made that clear. Now, Carson's simply saying if you're going to have a Muslim running for president, they'd have to make the same thing clear as well. On the other hand, I think Pat Buchanan raises a great point. If you're really a devout Muslim, you can't do both.
Yeah, that's right. The Pope is out here pushing socialism, redistribution of our wealth, and open borders. And this shouldn't be over here using politics where our people who are running our churches cannot use that without losing their tax exemption.
Well, he may not necessarily have the greatest understanding of capitalism, but I think perhaps this week, this visit will open his eyes a little bit more.
Okay,
I
Bill.
pray. I pray. Hey, thank you much for the telephone call. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story. I just got this from a website called the Christian Post, which I actually ended up signing up for daily emails. Pastor Saeed Abedini tasered, threatened with new charges and more time in Iran prison. His wife pleads for his release. You know the story about this guy. He's a pastor from Boise. He was arrested and accused of all sorts of things, being a spy, a proselytizer. If you want to talk about how a Muslim in government actually runs government, the theocracy in Iran is pretty much a textbook example of what serious issues we face in the Western world in dealing with this ideology. A writer by the name of Leonardo Blair says, after a new round of verbal and physical attacks from Iranian intelligence officers Wednesday, American pastor Saeed Abedini was threatened with additional charges and more time in prison as his faithful wife Nameh pleaded for his release. Saeed is still being denied medical treatment, and this is for injuries sustained as a result of beatings in the past, said a report shared with the Christian Post. And I was reading through this. Remember, when we negotiated the Iranian deal, the nuclear deal, nobody said, well, before we come to an agreement, President Obama and John Kerry never said, you got to release this guy, and we've got, I think, 3 or 4 other prisoners over there, too, as well at the moment. Nobody raised that question. It would be really simple. If the Iranians think this guy is such a threat, release him. Tell him to leave the country and never come back. 847. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. We have another caller with us. You're up next. You're on News Radio 1310. I should say 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good morning. You know, I think it's important that people realize we have another opportunity to hear, Pastor Shahram Hadian is going to be here next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in the area. Monday night, he'll be at the East Side Baptist Church where he spoke before over 400 people before. No charge. That's at 7 o'clock on Monday, the 28th. And then on the 29th, he'll be at the Magic Valley Evangelical Free Church there in Jerome.
Yeah.
And then on Wednesday, he's going to be all of these are free, no charge events.
Right.
On Wednesday, then he's going to be at the Canyon Crest Dining and Event Center at 7:30. And so there's 3 opportunities for people to hear him explain more about the fact that Islam, and I think this is one thing that O'Reilly and a lot of these people don't realize, as the pastors pointed out, that Islam is about 85% political and only about 15% religious in religion. So as the previous caller said, and you pointed out many, many times, and Ben Carson was trying to point out that if you don't believe in our system here, go someplace else.
Amen. I thank you much for the telephone call. In fact, of course, Pastor Hadian was on the air with us just last week, and I have a friend who hosts another talk show in the area, and we were talking the other day, and he was sharing with me that he was also having him on the air, so he'll get plenty of pre-publicity before he's in the area, and of course we will as we get closer to the event. I think it's difficult for people to sometimes, you sit here and you say, well, it's going to be here, here, and here. This is, people are driving down the road, or they're trying to listen while they're in the office or caring for the kids at home. And it's not like you've got a little chalkboard in your head that goes, aha, let me write that down. But if you get close, as we get closer to the event, obviously we'll be able to keep people informed about what's going on with all of that. And I think what I'll do is I'll just mention it on a day-to-day basis where he's going to be. But sure enough, I know that he's doing a presentation as well for law enforcers in the area. And they respect him because he has a law enforcement background as well. He also knows what dealing with the Iranians is like. His father, of course, was in the military there when the Shah was in power. And after the Ayatollahs took over, his family had to flee. Why? Because they'd all be dead by now. 10 minutes away from 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 53. Here's a thought. I got this today out of Washington Examiner. A fellow by the name of Bishop Gregory John Mansour writing, and I don't know a lot about him. It just says he is the bishop of the Eparchy of St. Maron, Brooklyn, New York, or St. Maron, the pronunciation. I think it may be an Eastern church. But I saw a couple of things today, and for all of the lefties out there who try to interpret how we should respond in faith to enemies, I think that he makes some great points here. And he's writing about his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He says, he did not say, turn the other cheek. He did not say that. He said, quote, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, offer him the left, unquote. And then the bishop says, a strike on the right cheek could only be done as a backhanded slap, sending a clear signal that the one slapping is superior and the one receiving the slap is inferior. For Jesus, this was not acceptable. He asked us to be defiant in the face of such cruelty and not accept an inferior status, but rather demand that the oppressors strike us again, but this time as an equal. Let us not forget how Jesus stood before Pontius Pilate as an equal, even though the Roman leader claimed to have power over him. And he says, lastly, Jesus did not say, quote, give the shirt off your back, unquote, as if this were some generous action for someone in need. Rather, he said, quote, if someone sues you for your cloak, offer him your shirt as well, unquote. Thus, instead of being a victim of another's unjust suit, turn and give him your shirt as well, and this way you show him a fearless love, with the hope that it will perhaps shame him and awaken him to justice. And then he goes through a list of things he would do to battle ISIS in the Middle East. He says, one thing we're not doing enough of, and of course he's not talking about a military response, he just said simply, a lot of people who are leaders of faith simply aren't bringing enough attention to what's going on over there. That might include Pope Francis, who has been touring this country the last few days and has made very few comments about what's going on with that part of the world, other than, you know what, you need to take in the refugees, you need to take in the migrants. Well, he has a big wall around Vatican City, and the only way someone can actually immigrate and live in Vatican City, which is a separate country unto itself, is to marry a Swiss guard. So the only people who can immigrate there are women, because the church will not allow another man to marry a Swiss guard. But no one else can get inside and ask that it become their home. I should point out, Rand Paul was speaking last night as a guest on Fox News, and the Kentucky senator suggests that if you really want someone to solve this problem, then ask the Muslim kingdoms to step up and actually get involved.
Many of the weapons that ISIS has now came from Saudi Arabia. So I do think Saudi Arabia is part of the problem, and someone needs to talk about it. And before we have refugees coming to America, I want to know why Saudi Arabia, who ostensibly is our ally, why they're not willing to take any refugees.
You know why? Because they think some of them are terrorists. That's why. And how many refugees are they taking in Oman? 0. How many refugees are they taking in Qatar? 0. How many refugees are they taking in Yemen? 0. But you know what? You should take them. Go right ahead. Yeah. If you want a few terrorists, go right ahead. We don't want them here, but we're okay if you take them. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 8:54 and 55. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking for a high. I think it's going to be 92 in some spots today. Yesterday we were looking at that potential, but then some clouds late afternoon kept things a little cooler. We got only into the high 80s, but I wasn't complaining about that. Coming up next Wednesday on the program, we're going to be joined between 8:30 and 9 o'clock by a member of the office. Jonathan Tripp, of course, is generally with us from Tripp Family Medicine, but Russell Singleton, who's a physician assistant, will be in studio next week with us between 8:30 and 9 o'clock in the morning. Russell has great expertise when it comes to things such as weight loss and diet, and just really, he's got a great medical mind. What we like to do when they're here is invite you to call in, and if you've got a medical question or an issue, they're here to help point you in the right direction. They may not be able to pinpoint the trouble you're having, but they certainly can give you some advice on where to go, and perhaps it could be something down the road that saves your life. You never know. And so what we're going to have is Russell in the studio with us next Wednesday. We do this every Wednesday with Tripp Family Medicine. It's called Better Health. If you're looking for Tripp Family Medicine's office, directly across the street from the main post office on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. We've got so much to talk about this morning. There's some photographs of John Boehner actually on the move at the Capitol building this morning. If you're just joining us and you have not yet heard, John Boehner is resigning at least as Speaker of the House of Representatives next month. We don't know yet if that's an actual resignation altogether from Congress, but we do know that he has been under pressure. He nearly got toppled as Speaker by conservatives in his caucus, Republican caucus, earlier this year. And over the summer, it was said he did not have the support any longer to stay on as Speaker of the House. So what he ended up doing, he's a Roman Catholic, and as I've pointed out before, I met him once several years ago, and I also saw him speak. He gave the keynote address in 2012 at the March for Life in Washington, and I happened to be just a few feet from the stage. He decided to stay on. It was one of his lifelong dreams was to get the Pope to speak in front of a joint session of Congress. That happened yesterday. Today, Boehner says he is stepping down. And we'll see someone come forward. We don't know who it's going to be. There may be some effort to broker a deal between the moderate Republicans. Michael Savage likes to say that, moderate, and he makes it sound like a lamb braying. Moderate Republicans and conservative Republicans. But it well could be that this is overall what you call a hostile takeover. And if that's the sense, the new leadership in the House could be all comprised of people elected since 2010. And Raul Labrador could well be among that leadership. I mentioned that if you weren't with us in the beginning of the hour. And yesterday, Labrador's office contacted me and said the congressman would like to start doing a weekly appearance on the program. And it strikes me that since this is not his district, this is Mike Simpson's district, and we know the two are very close friends, that well may mean that Mr. Labrador is going to be a member of the House leadership, and as such is going to have a much higher profile, including all across the state of Idaho. So you can expect that to start sometime in the next few weeks, and I'm sure if he's going to be joining us on that regular basis, he'll also be available for telephone calls and the like, and to really get into some meaty discussions with some people on the air. And in fact, we're also looking for a couple of other regular new guests joining us in the future. I can't let all of that out of the bag just yet. Some of the work is still ongoing about all of that. I do hope you can stick around. We have another hour of the program ahead. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Stephanie Clark, local author, coming up in the next hour of the program. She'll join us just after the 9:20 break. In the meantime, we have Fox News straight ahead at 9 o'clock and one more full hour of the program. Isn't that a great thing?